Alex Hart, a seasoned astronaut, was no stranger to deep space travel. His mission was supposed to be a routine survey of a distant star system, but things took a sudden and violent turn when his spacecraft encountered a massive asteroid storm. The tiny ship's systems failed as it plummeted through the atmosphere of an unknown planet. It was a chaotic descent, with alarms blaring and flames licking at the windows before the ship crashed into a forest of twisted alien trees. Bruised but miraculously alive, Alex stumbled out of the wreckage, scanning the dark landscape. The air was breathable, though it carried a strange metallic taste. Massive, gnarled trees loomed overhead, their bark an inky black that seemed to drink in the dim light from the distant sun. As he gathered supplies from the wreckage, Alex noticed strange shapes moving in the shadows. He wasn't alone. Chapter 2. The Black Figures. Over the next few days, Alex tried to establish a temporary camp. He found water in a nearby stream and managed to scavenge some rations from the ship, but he felt eyes on him constantly. At first he thought he was imagining it, but then he started catching glimpses of them. Creatures that stood on four limbs, their skin as black as the night sky, with eyes and mouths that seemed to glow white. They moved like dogs, yet something about their gait hinted at a more complex structure, almost humanoid in nature. Alex's first instinct was to fear them, especially when he noticed how silently they approached, observing him from the shadows with those glowing eyes. He kept a makeshift spear by his side whenever they drew close, but they never attacked. Chapter 3. First Contact. It was a week after the crash when the creatures made their first direct approach. Alex had just finished setting up a signal fire when he turned around to find one of them only a few feet away. It stared at him, its head tilted slightly like a curious puppy. He raised his spear instinctively, but the creature made no aggressive move. Instead, it slowly sat down, its white eyes locked on his. Alex took a hesitant step forward, then stopped. He realized there was an intelligence behind those glowing eyes, something more than just an animal's curiosity. He cautiously lowered his spear, and to his surprise, the creature seemed to understand this gesture. It took a few steps back, keeping its eyes on him, then turned and disappeared into the forest. Chapter 4. Building Trust. Over the following days, the creatures became bolder, venturing closer to Alex's camp and observing his every move. He started to notice differences between them, variations in size, the patterns of their white markings, and the shapes of their limbs. It was clear there was a hierarchy among them. Alex decided to take a risk. One night he left a piece of dried meat on the ground, backing away to see what would happen. The next morning it was gone, and fresh tracks surrounded the spot where he'd left it. Encouraged by this, he continued leaving small offerings, and the creatures began to venture closer, some even approaching while he was still awake. One evening, as Alex sat by the fire, a particularly large figure approached. It walked closer than any of the others had before, stopping just a few feet from him. It dropped something at his feet, a small, glittering stone. Alex picked it up and looked back at the creature, who watched him with its glowing eyes, before trotting back into the darkness. Days turned into weeks, and Alex's interactions with the creatures became more frequent and familiar. They started to follow him on his daily expeditions, always keeping a slight distance, as if escorting him. He began to understand some of their behaviors, how they communicated with subtle movements of their limbs and slight changes in the glow of their eyes. Alex named the large figure Shade after its inky black form, and the two developed a sort of unspoken understanding. Shade would bring Alex objects, some useful, some not, and Alex would offer food in return. Slowly, the other creatures began to mimic this behavior, leaving gifts and allowing Alex to touch them. He realized that they were not mere animals but sentient beings, capable of complex thought and social structures. The more time he spent with them, the more he felt an odd sense of belonging. It was as though he was becoming part of their pack. Chapter 6. A Permanent Home. Months passed, and Alex's hope for rescue dwindled. He had managed to survive by learning to hunt and gather edible plants, skills Shade seemed to help him with by guiding him to better hunting grounds and sources of food. Alex's temporary camp slowly transformed into a more permanent dwelling, complete with a shelter built from local materials and a series of stone tools. The black figures began to show signs of affection, pressing their heads into his hand or lying near him at night. Shade in particular grew incredibly close, almost like a companion. It wasn't long before Alex stopped thinking about leaving the planet. The creatures had become his new family, and he realized that, in a way, he had found a place where he truly belonged. Chapter 7. The Language of Shadows. Living among the creatures, Alex gradually picked up on their form of communication. It was an intricate system of gestures, sounds, and changes in the glow of their eyes and mouths. Shade seemed to take it upon himself to teach Alex, repeating gestures and observing his attempts to mimic them. Over time, Alex could understand basic concepts like danger, food, and emotions. He began to help the creatures in their own tasks, whether it was searching for food, repairing their dens, or navigating the dense forest. In return, they shared more of their world with him, leading him to hidden places, glowing caverns beneath the surface, pools of shimmering liquid that healed injuries, and fields where strange luminous plants grew. Chapter 8. The Bonding Ritual. One night, under the twin moons of the planet, the creatures gathered around Alex. They had never done this before. Shade approached him, a faint hum coming from deep within his chest. Slowly, other figures joined in, creating a low, resonant chorus. Alex felt a strange warmth in the air, as if the very atmosphere was vibrating with life. Shade extended a limb toward him, and Alex instinctively placed his hand on it. The other creatures did the same, forming a circle. There was a sudden burst of light that surrounded them, and in that moment, Alex understood. It was a bonding ritual, an acceptance of him into their pack, not as a human among aliens, but as one of them. Chapter 9. A New Beginning. Years passed, though Alex had long since lost track of time. He no longer thought of himself as a stranded astronaut, but as a member of the pack. He walked on all fours like the others, had learned to navigate the planet's ecosystem, and could communicate almost fluently in the creature's unique language. His old life, the distant stars, and the crash that had brought him here seemed like faded memories. Occasionally, a feeling of nostalgia would rise, but it was always fleeting. He had found something far more profound. A new home and a family in a world where he was the only human. He knew he would live out his days among the black figures, exploring the planet's secrets and thriving in the place that had once been his prison, but had become his sanctuary. As the years continued, Alex's bond with the black figures only grew stronger, and though he was far from where he had begun, he had found a kind of peace that no earthly place could have ever offered him. Here, on this distant planet, surrounded by the creatures with glowing eyes, he had found his true place in the universe.